What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a daytime talk show, expecting a friendly chat, but instead finds herself in the middle of a brewing storm? Marla Gibbs, the iconic actress we all know and love, from The Jeffersons and 227, sat down on the reel, expecting the usual warmth and celebration of her legendary career. But what started as a conversation about her decades in the industry quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. The tension between Marla, Garcelle Beauvais, and Jeannie Mai became so intense that producers had no choice but to step in. Before we get into exactly what was said that caused this legendary actress to be escorted off set, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about this whole situation. Trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end, because what Marla said in those final moments left everyone speechless. The afternoon started like any other taping of the reel. Marla Gibbs walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, waving to the audience with that signature smile that has captivated viewers for generations. She was there to promote her recent projects and reflect on her incredible journey through Hollywood. Garcelle and Jeannie were all smiles at first, greeting her with hugs and compliments about how amazing she looked. The audience was clearly excited to hear from someone who had paved the way for so many Black actresses in the industry. Garcelle opened the conversation by praising Marla's groundbreaking work. Talking about how The Jeffersons and 227 were shows that changed the landscape of television. Marla thanked her graciously, sharing a few anecdotes about working with Sherman Hemsley and the rest of the cast. The energy was light, the laughter was genuine, and everything seemed to be going perfectly according to plan. Jeannie chimed in with questions about Marla's longevity in the business, asking what advice she would give to younger actresses trying to make it in Hollywood today. That's when things started to shift. Marla paused for a moment, and you could see something change in her expression. She looked directly at Jeannie and said that the advice she would give is to remember where you come from and to never forget the people who opened doors before you. Her tone wasn't harsh, but there was an edge to it that made both hosts exchange a quick glance. Garcelle tried to lighten the mood by laughing and agreeing, saying that respect for those who came before is so important. But Marla wasn't done, she continued, saying that sometimes she watches daytime television and wonders if the younger generation truly understands the sacrifices that were made so they could sit in those chairs. The audience got quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Jeannie shifted in her seat, clearly trying to figure out if Marla was speaking generally or if this was directed at them. She decided to address it head-on, asking Marla if she felt that they specifically had been disrespectful in some way. Marla didn't back down. She said that it wasn't about them personally, but about a culture in entertainment where people are so focused on being relatable and trendy that they forget the foundation that was laid by those who fought real battles in this industry. Garcelle jumped in, her voice measured but firm, saying that she had nothing but respect for the legends who came before her, and that she tries every day to honor that legacy. She mentioned her own journey as a Haitian immigrant who had to fight for every role she ever got, and how she understands struggle in this business. Marla nodded slowly, but then said something that made the entire situation even more tense. She said that understanding struggle and actually honoring it are two different things, and that sometimes the way these shows are formatted, with all the gossip and the focus on drama, it diminishes the real conversations that need to be had about representation and respect. Jeannie's face changed completely. She sat up straighter and said that the reel has always been about having authentic conversations and that they've tackled serious issues alongside the lighter content. She pointed out that the show has discussed important topics about race, gender, and equality many times. Marla responded by saying that talking about issues and embodying the values are not the same thing. She specifically mentioned that she had seen clips of the show where the hosts had made light of situations that she felt deserved more gravity and seriousness. Now Garcelle was getting visibly frustrated. She asked Marla for specific examples because she didn't appreciate vague accusations. Marla mentioned a segment from a few months prior where the hosts had discussed a controversy involving an older Black actress, and she felt the conversation had been dismissive and more focused on entertainment value than on the real issue at hand. Jeannie immediately defended the segment, saying that they had tried to present multiple perspectives and that they always aimed to be fair in their discussions. The back and forth was escalating quickly. Marla said that intentions don't matter if the impact is harmful, and that as women with platforms, they have a responsibility to be more careful about how they discuss sensitive topics, especially when it involves people who have been in the industry for decades. Garcelle countered by saying that they can't please everyone, and that part of having these conversations means that sometimes people will disagree with their takes. She said that Marla was welcome to her opinion, but that coming on the show and essentially calling them disrespectful was not the way to have a productive dialogue. Marla's response was calm, but cutting. She said that she had not planned to have this conversation, but when Jeannie asked her about advice for younger people in the industry, she felt compelled to speak her truth. She said that if they felt attacked by her honesty, perhaps that was something they needed to examine within themselves. The audience was completely silent now, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jeannie looked at Garcelle as if to say, "Can you believe this is happening?" Garcelle took a deep breath and said that she respected Marla's right to her opinion, but that she didn't agree with the characterization of them or the show. She said that they work hard every day to create content that is both entertaining and meaningful, and that they've had countless legends on the show who have felt celebrated and respected. Marla replied by saying that just because some people felt respected doesn't mean that the overall approach is always appropriate. Jeannie had clearly had enough. She said that she felt like Marla had come on the show with an agenda, and that if she had such strong negative feelings about the reel, perhaps she shouldn't have agreed to appear in the first place. Marla's eyes flashed, and she said that she came on the show because she was asked to because she believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But, she continued, sitting here and experiencing this conversation firsthand was confirming some of her concerns about how disagreement and criticism are handled. Garcelle interjected before Jeannie could respond, her voice tight with controlled emotion. She said that Marla was being unfair and that she was turning what should have been a celebration of her career into an attack on them. Marla shook her head slowly and said that the fact that they were interpreting her honest feedback as an attack was exactly the problem. She said that in her day, when someone with more experience offered criticism, people listened and reflected instead of getting defensive. That comment hit a nerve. Jeannie leaned forward and said that times have changed, and that just because someone is older or has been in the industry longer doesn't mean they get to talk down to people without being challenged. She said that respect goes both ways, and that Marla was not showing them respect by coming on their show and criticizing them in front of their audience. Marla responded by saying that she was not talking down to anyone. She was simply speaking honestly, and if they couldn't handle honest feedback, that said more about them than it did about her. The audience was completely riveted, some people looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward in their seats trying to catch every word. Garcelle said that there was a difference between honest feedback and public humiliation, and that Marla could have reached out to them privately if she had concerns instead of airing this out on camera. Marla laughed, a short, bitter sound, and said that she had actually tried to address concerns through proper channels before, but that her messages had gone unanswered. This was news to both hosts, and you could see the surprise register on their faces. Jeannie asked what Marla meant by that. What concerns and what messages? Marla explained that several months ago, after that segment she had mentioned earlier about the older black actress, she had reached out through a mutual contact asking if she could have a conversation with the producers about how these topics were being handled. She said she never received a response, and that she had let it go until she was invited to appear on the show. She figured that perhaps this was an opportunity to have the conversation face to face. Garcelle looked genuinely taken aback. She said that she had no knowledge of any outreach from Marla, and that if such a message had been sent, it certainly never reached her. She turned to Jeannie, who also shook her head, saying she had heard nothing about it. Marla said that whether they personally knew about it or not, the fact remained that her concerns had been ignored. And that spoke to a larger issue about how feedback from veterans in the industry is received, or in this case, not received. Jeannie's frustration was reaching a boiling point. She said that Marla couldn't hold them responsible for messages they never received, and that it wasn't fair to ambush them on their own show because of a communication breakdown that may have happened at a production level. Marla replied that she had not ambushed anyone, that she had simply answered a question honestly, and that their reaction to her honesty was proving her point about how criticism is handled in modern television. The conversation was spiraling. Both sides dug in and unwilling to back down. Garcelle tried a different approach, softening her tone and saying that she understood Marla's frustration and that miscommunication happens in this business all the time. She said that perhaps they could table this discussion and have a proper conversation off camera where they could really dig into these issues without the pressure of an audience and cameras. Marla looked at her for a long moment and said that the problem with that suggestion was that these conversations needed to happen publicly because the issues were public. She continued, saying that too many important discussions get pushed behind closed doors where they can be controlled and sanitized, and that real change only happens when people are willing to be uncomfortable in public spaces. Jeannie shot back that there was a difference between productive discomfort and what was happening right now, which she described as unproductive conflict. She said that Marla was grandstanding and using their platform to make herself look like some kind of moral authority while making them look bad. Marla's voice rose slightly for the first time. She said that she had no interest in making anyone look bad, but that if they looked bad, it was because of their own reactions and their own inability to receive criticism with grace. She said that the defensiveness and the immediate move to paint her as the villain was exactly the kind of behavior that shuts down important conversations. Garcelle said that Marla was not being fair, that they had a right to defend themselves when they felt they were being unfairly characterized on their own show. Marla said that she had been in this industry for over 5 decades, and that she had earned the right to speak her mind without being dismissed as unfair or as grandstanding. She said that her career and her legacy spoke for themselves, and that she didn't need to tear anyone down to build herself up. Jeannie responded that invoking her legacy as a shield against criticism was not acceptable, and that longevity in the business doesn't give anyone the right to be disrespectful. Marla stood up from her seat. The audience gasped audibly. She said that she was not going to sit there and be accused of being disrespectful when all she had done was speak truth. She said that if they couldn't handle a real conversation about the state of daytime television and the way serious topics are treated, then perhaps she had misjudged their ability to have meaningful dialogue. Garcelle stood up as well, her voice firm, saying that Marla was welcome to her opinions, but that walking off set was not going to prove whatever point she thought she was making. Marla said she wasn't walking off. She was simply standing because she was tired of sitting in a space where her words were being twisted. Jeannie remained seated, but her body language was rigid, arms crossed, clearly done with the entire interaction. She said that Marla was being dramatic and that this whole thing had gotten out of hand. Marla turned to face Jeannie directly and said that dismissing someone's concerns as dramatic was a classic way to avoid accountability, and that she expected better from women who claimed to champion other women. That statement hung in the air like a bomb. Garcelle's face flushed, and she said that Marla had crossed a line by questioning their commitment to supporting other women. She said that both she and Jeannie had spent years lifting up other women in the industry, and that Marla had no right to suggest otherwise based on one heated conversation. Marla responded that actions speak louder than words, and that how they were treating her in this moment was an action that spoke volumes. By this point, you could see producers off to the side making frantic gestures. One of them approached the stage area, clearly trying to figure out how to de-escalate the situation. The audience was completely silent, eyes wide, watching what felt like a moment that would be replayed and discussed for years to come. Marla noticed the producer approaching and said loudly enough for the microphones to catch that she was not going to be silenced or managed, that she had said what she needed to say. Garcelle, seeing the producer, turned to Marla and said that perhaps it would be best if they took a break and sorted this out away from the cameras. Marla said that there was nothing to sort out, that she had made her position clear, and that she stood by everything she had said. Jeannie finally stood up and said that if Marla was done, then she should probably leave because this conversation was clearly not going anywhere productive. The words were pointed, the invitation to exit unmistakable. Marla looked at both women, then at the audience, and then back at the hosts. She said that she had come here today hoping to have a meaningful conversation about her career and about the industry she loves. But instead, she had encountered exactly the kind of defensiveness and dismissiveness that prevents real progress. She said that she was disappointed, but not surprised, and that this experience had been incredibly revealing. Garcelle said that the only thing that had been revealed was Marla's willingness to create drama where none needed to exist. Marla's eyes narrowed at Garcelle's last comment. She took a step closer to the desk and said that calling out mediocrity wasn't creating drama. It was her responsibility as someone who had fought for these platforms to exist. She said that women like her had broken down doors so that women like them could walk through, and watching those doors be used for superficial entertainment was painful. Jeannie stood straighter, jaw clenched. She said that Marla was being condescending, that their show had tackled countless important issues, and that cherry-picking one segment to condemn everything was dishonest. Marla replied that good work in some areas doesn't excuse problematic work in others. A producer approached the stage, speaking into a headset. The audience whispered to each other, some recording on their phones, despite the policy. Understanding they were witnessing something extraordinary, Garcelle tried finding middle ground. She said that she respected Marla's legacy and was willing to acknowledge the segment could have been handled differently. She extended an olive branch, saying maybe this difficult conversation could start a more productive dialogue. For a moment, it looked like Marla might soften. But Jeannie spoke up. She said that while they appreciated feedback, they weren't going to be lectured to on their own show. She said Garcelle was being too diplomatic, and that Marla had come with an agenda to criticize them. That moment of potential reconciliation evaporated. Marla turned to Jeannie and said she had no agenda other than honesty. She said that Jeannie was young enough to be her granddaughter, and while that didn't diminish Jeannie's value, it did mean she had a lot to learn about grace under pressure. Jeannie's face flushed red. She said that bringing age into it was a low blow, and that being older didn't make Marla right or give her the right to be patronizing. Marla laughed sharply and said that she had been in confrontations that actually mattered, fights for civil rights and representation. She said this conversation didn't even register compared to the real battles she had fought. Garcelle interjected firmly. She said no one was questioning Marla's struggles, but using them as a weapon wasn't fair. She said they had also faced their own battles, and dismissing those was hurtful. Marla said there was a difference between fighting for a seat at the table and fighting. For the table to exist at all, the audience was transfixed. Some had tears in their eyes, others looked angry. A few nodded in agreement with Marla. The division in the room mirrored the division on stage. The producer stepped fully onto the stage and said loudly that perhaps they should take a commercial break. Marla turned to him and said there was no need because she was done. She said she had said what she came to say, and whether anyone liked it or not, it needed to be said. Jeannie said the only thing they would reflect on was how someone they invited as a guest had shown them such disrespect. Marla said that if they felt attacked by honest assessment, that was their issue, not hers. Garcelle said there was such a thing as tact and timing. Marla responded that she had been tactful for 50 years, and at her age, she had earned the right to speak plainly. The producer spoke again, more firmly. He said Marla's car was ready if she wanted to leave, making it clear her departure was expected. Marla said she didn't need to be escorted out, like she had done something wrong. Garcelle asked why. Marla had agreed to appear if she felt this way about their show. Marla said she had hoped she had misjudged them, that there was more substance than she had given them credit for. This experience had confirmed her initial instincts. Jeannie's voice was cold now. She said thousands of viewers loved their show and found value in it every day. Marla said that popularity was not the same as quality, and making people feel good was not the same as making people think. The words hung in the air, devastating in their simplicity. Garcelle looked like she had been slapped. The audience stirred, some people standing to support Marla, others defending the hosts loudly. The producers looked alarmed as the conflict spread into the audience. Marla picked up her purse. She said she had said everything she needed to say. She told them she bore them no personal ill will, but stood by every word. She said growth only comes from discomfort. Garcelle said they would reflect on this conversation, but Marla should also reflect on whether this was really the best way to facilitate change. Marla said she had not burned anything that wasn't already rotten. Jeannie walked around the desk, placing herself between Marla and Garcelle. She said Marla should leave now. Marla looked at her and said that Jeannie was a fighter, and perhaps that fire could be directed toward more meaningful battles. Jeannie said she didn't need Marla's advice. The two women stood facing each other for a long moment. Finally, Marla stepped back and turned toward the exit. The audience erupted into a mixture of applause, boos, and shocked murmurs. As Marla walked toward the exit, she paused and turned back one last time. She said that she had lived through too much to remain silent when she saw potential being wasted. She said every generation has to decide what they stand for, and she hoped this generation would choose substance over style. With that, she walked off the stage, her head held high. The studio fell into stunned silence. Garcelle and Jeannie stood there processing what happened. Garcelle's eyes were glistening with unshed tears. The producers rushed around, trying to figure out how to proceed. Garcelle sat down heavily. She said she couldn't believe what just happened. Jeannie sat beside her and said that she had felt the tension from the beginning. A producer approached and spoke to them quietly. They nodded, and Garcelle turned to the audience. Her voice was shaky, but she said what they had witnessed was difficult and uncomfortable, but also real. Jeannie added that they respected Marla's legacy, even if they disagreed with how she expressed her concerns. She said they stood by their work and their mission. Garcelle said they would take a break, that they all needed a moment to breathe. As the cameras cut, both hosts visibly deflated. The audience buzzed with conversation. Within minutes, clips would start circulating online, and everyone would have an opinion about who was right and who was wrong. In a back hallway, Marla walked toward the exit with her head high. A production assistant walked nervously beside her. Marla smiled and said that everything that happened was necessary, even if it was uncomfortable. When the cameras came back on, both hosts had composed themselves. Garcelle said that what happened was unexpected and intense. She said criticism was welcome, but there was a way to offer it that felt constructive rather than destructive. Jeannie said they had invited Marla to celebrate her, and what transpired was painful and public. She said they were not going to apologize for defending themselves. The audience applauded their support. By the time the show ended, the incident had exploded on social media. Hashtags were trending, clips were being shared millions of times. Some sided with Marla, praising her for speaking truth. Others defended the hosts, saying Marla had been disrespectful. What had started as a promotional appearance had become a defining moment about respect, criticism, and generational differences. It was messy and uncomfortable and real. The incident would be remembered as one of daytime television's most dramatic moments, a time when the facade cracked and revealed the real tensions underneath. 3 accomplished women stood their ground and refused to back down. Regardless of who was right or wrong, there was something powerful in that. A reminder that passion still exists, and that sometimes the most important moments are the ones that make us all uncomfortable.